Welcome to the Life Self-Mastery Podcast, where we bring in entrepreneurs who have created online businesses and improved their lifestyles. Here's your host, Rohit Malhotra.
Hi everyone, this is Rohit from Life Self-Mastery, and today I'm thrilled to have Raveen Sastry, who's a strategic advisor at Zeta Global and a partner at Multiply Ventures, which has investments in more than 30 companies like Open, Better India, Shop Kirana, and others. He was earlier the co-founder of Nudgespot, a technology company that builds in-app messenger browser and mobile push and email messages that support businesses communicate with their customers. Prior to Nudgespot, he co-founded Hoopers and served the same company as the head of products and marketing. Previously, Sastry also founded Myntra and served the company as head of B2B and indirect sales. Raveen is an alumni of McGill University. Welcome to the show, Raveen.
Thank you so much, Rohit. Just a small correction there that Multiply Ventures, we haven't started investing yet. So okay. These are more personal investments that we've done. But yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, Rohit.
Right, awesome. You've worked in unicorn company like Myntra, Hoopers, and others. What was your journey in Myntra, and how did you get into become a founder at Myntra?
Yeah, I guess, I'm very tempted to say, luck, but of course, I can, Myntra never ended up being a unicorn. But, quickly on my journey, I'm, I think very similar to Pranav. Actually, I did my engineering from RV and then went to McGill to do my MBA. My dad always kind of, I think, influenced me into getting into startups. So, I worked briefly at Netcraft, which is a company that was founded by Prashant Prakash from Axel. Right. I worked briefly there, and then those were the stages when they were actually growing. And then I just decided to go to the US, and of course, without a job, given I have a Canadian citizenship, it was much easier to just go there. And then found, I think, my first job, really as a very junior engineer at a company called Zora. So I was really sixth employee, and they owned a GPS-based application, which of course now we take for granted. But those days, GPS was very new. This is 2000, right? Right. And then of course kind of came back here, and that's when I got had a common friend with Mukesh, and Mukesh had just started. Mukesh, Vineet, and Ashutosh. They had just kind of decided to start this company, Myntra. And doing personalized products, right? And more than the company, I just loved all three of them. So decided to join the company, and also of course I was also an angel investor at Myntra.
Nice.
So that's so that's how I got into Myntra, and and then been obviously really interesting journey from there. Always been in startups from there. So. Did Hoopers, which is in the baby and kids e-commerce, Nudgespot, which is in the marketing automation space, really targeted more towards publishers. So it's been a really interesting journey. But I won't lie, part of it is I had the luxury to make these decisions without thinking too much about my finances, since I had a really strong financial backing. Right, always helps if you have if everything fails, at least you have a soft landing. So.
Right.
I think, I won't underestimate that factor.
Correct. And, what were some of the biggest takeaways from working at a fast-paced company like Myntra?
Oh, man. Yeah. So this is in 2007, right? So first one is venture capital was super, super new.
Right.
There wasn't much, money around. But I think, so one thing that, and of course, Mukesh obviously being a dear friend, but also, I have a lot of respect for the way he, even initially, this was also his first company, right? And I think one of the things that he always said, which always stuck to me, right, is one thing is for sure, you're always going to be smarter this quarter than you were the previous quarter, right? And that loop continues. And so what is really critical is to stay alive, right? Irrespective of anything. And that's one thing we did extremely well at Myntra, right? So if it got to a point, we always had 6 months of cash, right? So essentially, if it meant we not taking salaries, we need to cut salaries, we did all of that, moved to a smaller office. But irrespective, we always had 6 months of runway. And this was, in hindsight, I think this was probably one of the largest reasons for us to be successful, right? The second big thing was our ability to make these changes very, very quickly, and really listen to the market, right? So we were in personalized products. We tried everything in personalization. We gave it everything, right? So whether it's a decent website where people could, put their image on T-shirts, mugs, all of that. We had offline, sitting in malls. We did B2B, build everything. But then, realized that, it's just very, very hard to build a large company, which was really what four of us wanted to do. That's how the whole change into fashion happened, right? And if you think about, at that point, our revenue wasn't, small given, the overall context. But one of the things that we did was decided to take this big leap of faith, right? And kind of jump into fashion e-commerce. With a really with a big belief that people will, and we saw that there was a gap in the market. We felt that internet, online could kind of solve that gap, right? And of course, a big leap of faith there was people will buy shoes and clothing online, right? And when many people at that time said it, not possible, but we made this big change, and I think that the ability to build a company that can make these changes quickly, I think is super critical. And that was one other, big takeaway. The third one, of course, is, I think what everyone talks about is super obsessive about your, key metrics. Again, not, 10, 15, 20 metrics, but, your top 2 or 3 metrics. And I think that we always were on top of. And, we had our Monday morning management meeting, and we would drill on these every single week, right? And this went on. And as you keep doing this day in and day out for, weeks, months, years, I think you just start getting better and better at it, right? And anyway, and with the core belief that anything you measure, you can improve. So I think, so these, for me, at least, these were the big 3 takeaways.
Right. No, it's very interesting that, in these times, people have started buying products online, but 10, 12 years back, it was very difficult for some of the online companies to convince people to buy at least apparels and shoes online.
Yes.
But the shift did come, and when it did come, I think there were a lot of stories like Jabong, Myntra, Flipkart was taking a lot of revenue from offline companies.
Yeah, and that was interesting, right? In the beginning, for us to, of course, we were not manufacturers, right? So we were really a marketplace.
Correct.
And it was very interesting because a lot of these offline guys would actually look at us very suspiciously and say, really? You guys are going to take these clothes and sell it online, take these shoes and sell it online? Of course, there were a few believers, Puma and some of these guys, but we had a lot of guys who just looked at us very suspiciously, right? And but of course, over time, I think we luckily were able to prove to everybody that what a large channel this can be, and I think everybody came on board very, very quickly after that.
Right. So Raveen, you've been an angel investor, you've been investing. So do you believe that founders should always be raising?
Oh, wow. Yeah. I go through this emotion so many times, but I think, if you ask me, this question 10 years back, I would have said yes. Right. But today, I think, I have a lot more stronger thesis on this. And I think founders should not always be raising, right? I think the objective of building a company is to build a large, impactful company that is profitable, right? That's the fundamental reason to build a company.
Correct.
And the other piece I've realized through working is that this cash flow led growth, right, is a key habitual driver, right? So what that means is building a business that generates free cash flow is really a habit. And you'll see a lot of businesses say, I'm going to turn profitable next year after that. I mean, I can give many examples, whether it's KTM, whether it's a Flipkart, or even whether it's a Myntra, right? But the fact is that unless that becomes a habit, right, it's very, very hard to make this change, right? And you'll see many companies are just not able to fundamentally make that shift. Large exits do not really, for me, those are just exceptions to the rule, right? The fundamental reason to build a business needs to be profitability.
Correct. And, what is the right way for founders to approach, OKR setting when regards to requirement for the next round which they want to raise?
Again, we've just come out of a really kind of a very long bull cycle, right?
Right.
So there've been, many examples of companies raising large amounts just on PowerPoints and all of that, right?
Right.
So again, I think, the thing with the questions, devil's all in the details, right? So if you have to start thinking about fundraising, I think the key thing is, okay, so let me come back, right? So initially, your initial round, whether it's an angel or a seed round, all that money needs to go in figuring out your product market fit, right?
Correct.
Until you get there, there is absolutely no reason for you to be spending large amounts of money. And we've seen, and in fact, you should talk to, Sumit from Shop Kirana, right? I think one of the things he always talks about, right, is saying how they spend their money really getting product market fit. And the initial seed money, and they did that just almost like for them it's a religion, right? What are the categories that can give you margins? What locations should you be selling to give you that? How deep do you go into a category so that you get in, you understand your unit economics, right? And so they went really, really deep just with their money, with their seed and angel money to figure out really, really strong product market fit before they even try, scale to multiple cities and all of that, right? So if you look at what it means, what are your OKRs, what are your, metrics that you require to raise money, for me, at least from your seed, by the time you go to Series A, you better have your product market fit. I don't think, anyone should be raising crazy Series A's before that.
Correct, makes sense. And you mentioned about metrics which you were focusing on Myntra. What are the metrics founders should hone in on, and what are the metrics they should basically disregard?
So I won't talk about what to disregard, but I'll tell you some of the metrics that we've at least pushed a lot of our companies to kind of focus on, right? So
right.
in terms of consumer metrics, of course, the key ones are your repeats, your CAC, and some of these, right?
Right.
Then you have your product metrics with your NPS, adoption, virality, all of that. Then financial metrics is obviously revenue, margin, unit economics, right? All of these are extremely critical metrics. But one of the things that we're starting to focus more and more on is what we're calling kind of development metrics, right? Or your development impact. And I think, it's very valid, especially in these COVID-19 days and why, we're seeing more and more viruses, why we're seeing, with this whole climate change, what's happening, right? So some of the things that we want companies to start very, very seriously think about is development impact, right? So whether it's inclusion, if you're a fintech firm, it's access and affordability if you're in Edtech, if you're in I guess in retail, think of sustainability, right? And these obviously sound like secondary metrics, but in a lot of ways we're starting to ask these companies to very, very seriously have these metrics measured on a quarterly basis. Right. The other metrics I think people have written about, and I think there is enough information. But development impact, I think, is something that many companies just don't focus on, and I believe every company needs to start thinking about it very, very seriously.
Interesting. And is decision making in venture capital different from decision making in operations? Since you've been an operator for such a long time, and how do they compare?
Yeah, so I'm obviously going to talk to you as a very novice kind of investor, right? As in, right. I've done a lot of angel investing and all of that, but in venture capital. But let me tell you some of the things, at least for me, that I've seen the last year since I've been in very seriously thinking about venture capital, right? So one is a lot of the operational metrics tend to be, at least in my experience, a lot of short to medium term, right? In most cases, Again, I don't want to generalize, but in most cases, the operational metrics are short to medium term. How do I increase my revenue? How do I reduce costs? What do I do to increase repeats, adoption, stickiness, all of that, right?
Right.
These tend to be your operational metrics that you kind of focus on, and obviously all your decisions are based on some of the metrics that you are trying to improve. Right? Venture capital in general tends to play out on, I think, slightly longer term. Right? Results tend to play out over 7-9 years. Right?
Right.
So for example, you start with the theses, right? And for example, a big thesis in Edtech is that the gap between education and outcome, and we define education as how we learn, right? And outcome as what we want out of education, right? Our big thesis has been that gap is only increasing, right? And technology has a way to fundamentally alter that or reduce the gap significantly. Now, this is great. The thing is that this is going to start playing out in the next 7-9 years, right?
Correct.
So as much as it's important to kind of look at these micro changes that are happening today. The results of this you'll see only over the long term, right? So that's why this decision making is I think fundamentally different.
Correct.
Yeah.
Interesting. And you mentioned about the COVID. We're recording this podcast in March. In these times of coronavirus, how should founders be prepared in terms of allocating capital and people? And what would be your advice on that?
Yeah, so this is something that we've discussed a lot internally between my partners, Sanjay and Bhushan, who also have actually a lot of experience in running companies. Bhushan was the president of Paytm. Sanjay has been a marketing guy throughout, right? And we've spent a lot of time looking deeply into what our companies that we've invested in together, which is close to 30 companies. How should they start thinking about COVID, post-COVID times? So I think two things, right? So one is fundraise is clearly going to be difficult. I think it is going to get trickier. Lot of funds are going to start looking internally to first look at funding their own portfolio companies even before they look out, right?
Right.
So what this means is many of the companies that have not, again, raised large rounds or are, at the end of their cycle or are ready to raise new rounds. I think one of the things they have to do now is figure out how they're going to ensure that the money lasts them for the next 12, 18 months at least, right? So that's one advice, right? For sure, you have to figure out how to last the next 12, 18 months. Now, the companies that obviously have enough money and have just raised, I think for them it becomes critical to still be very prudent about how they spend money. For example, spending on marketing right now. Obviously a lot of it depends on the sector you're in and all of that. But we believe that many verticals, spending on marketing right now is useless, right?
Okay.
They just need to get it to zero, close to zero, till things get to close to normal, which we don't know when it will happen. It's such an unknown. Can it happen in 3 weeks? Unlikely. Can it happen in 3 months? Possibly. Can it happen in 6 months? Most likely, right? So essentially start looking at your marketing budgets like that, right?
Okay.
And I think that is critical. Third is people. Of course, I think one of our recommendations obviously is avoid removing people at this point, because you'll spend much more than that in the next 6-9 months to hire people. So we, teams with strong culture, and hopefully many of our companies actually have that. Talk internally and try and figure out how you can move your a lot of your fixed pay into variable, right? And hopefully be able to actually pay them a year from now when things are a little more certain, right? So that is at least one, reduce your fixed by at least 30-35%. Second one is renegotiate your lease, right? A lot of landlords are willing to do that. Right. So renegotiate that, so reduce prices there. So I think there are some innovative ways in general, for you to increase your runway. Right. So that's that's generally been our advice to a lot of our portfolio companies. In terms of fundraise, I think it has to be about familiarity. Start with people you're most familiar with, which is your existing investors, and then kind of go out with decreasing familiarity, right? So cool. That's about the fundraise.
Got it. No, absolutely, that's a sound advice. And Raveen, what I've seen is most of the unicorn startups or the biggest startups there in the tier one cities. Even if you look at India or US and in Europe, but with the rise of remote, do you think a startup can even have an office or in a tier two or tier three city?
Oh, actually, many of our companies are in tier two, tier three cities. But the reason I think what really matters is why you're having the office there, right?
Right.
If the office is there just to as a way to kind of save costs or some of that, I don't think those are the right reasons to kind of be there. I think the reason to be in tier two if a chunk of your business exists there, right?
Right.
And which is true with bunch of our portfolio companies, whether it's a deal share, whether Shop Kirana, Gramophone. Right, all of these guys are sitting in tier two cities and doing extremely well. Right, all of these guys. But fundamentally, the business is there. Right.
Right.
Now should you have offices? Fundamentally, believe that absolutely. I think it's maybe I'm still a little bit old school. I don't know. But I think, for me, I still believe you need to have an office. An office is not just a place to work, build a sense of community, togetherness. Believe it's a little more focused, less distractions, right? All of these kind of great things about, working in office. Having said that, I think every single office needs to be remote enabled, not because, you're going to take care of these cases when you have the COVIDs and these kind of situations. But in general, I think work from home, especially in places like Bangalore, Mumbai, where traffic is terrible, I think adds significant value to the quality of life of your employees. Right. So I think it's having both is extremely critical.
Interesting. And what do you think about portfolio construction when it comes to Multiply Ventures? Are you stage and sector agnostic? Will you be stage and sector agnostic?
No, actually, absolutely not. So for us, the two things that are, I would say, we have very, very strong. No, I wouldn't say in a bias. Actually, it's more like a thesis on is definitely stage and sector, right?
Okay.
So for us, we want to be the first check in companies, right? And when you say first check, first institutional check. So we like to come in, what we call kind of post-product, pre-product market fit, right? So that's the ideal stage for us to come in. And again, check size of 500K to a million to begin with, and then follow on up to 3 million, right? So we like to stay with them for a couple of rounds after that. But in terms of our thesis, right? So ours is not a very, again, our thesis I think is broad enough that we can make changes, but it's also narrow enough that it's a very strong guiding force for us, right? How we're going to invest, would love to kind of talk a little bit about, of course, portfolio construction, but I think a big part of that actually is the thesis, right? So our thesis actually surrounds a few things, right? So we have three big, statements that we're making, and we'll see how this whole thing plays out, right? So one for us is that traditional banking and financial services will become infrastructure, right, and opaque to users. What this really means is that, and we've seen this play out, there are two parts to this. One is that, the middle class is growing, and the middle class has different goals, which the banks are just not able to cater to, or they haven't changed to cater to them, right? So they still cater to your HNIs and all of that very, very well. But for middle class, slightly lower middle class, all of that, I don't think banks do a good job and giving them access to products and services that can be extremely useful for them. And we think that the layer above that will actually build some very, very valuable companies. And in that thesis, we of course invested in Open, we invested in Yellow, Jupiter, a bunch of these companies that we believe can take advantage of this opportunity. A second part of our thesis is, like I said earlier, is the gap between education, which really is, your school, learning skills and hobbies, all of that, and outcome, which really is what the outcome is. Is it, are you ready to, job readiness? Is it mastery? So education and outcome, I think the gap has increased significantly over the years. Right. And now the good part, there is technology that can really bridge this gap. So we love companies that can actually use technology to make to build offerings um, that are both anyone can access and extremely affordable, right? So what is that is like a I guess a strong offering. And when we talk about it, it's not just about taking offline education and bringing it online, but it's really about how you use technology to make learning a better experience, right?
Right.
And of course, I think at a thumbs example, we have a company called SkillLink, right? That does that
Okay.
extremely well, which again bridges the gap between engineering and job readiness. Of course, they started off with mechanical engineering and now moved into electrical and um, uh, electronics, right? But the fundamental idea there is essentially say, what is that skill required in order for you to do a job, and then can you use technology to really improve that learning? And when I say technology, it really means, can you gamify it to make it more interesting? Can you provide it? Can you provide bite-sized information so it's easier to take in and remember? Of course, the example of that is Duolingo. There's a
Right.
company called Music Muni that we're looking at in the music education space. It's called, the app is called Riaz, right?
Okay.
That really changes fundamentally the way you learn music, right? It's not, again, so much about starting off with Sare Gama, but, the idea is that if you really want to learn how to sing Tyagaraja songs, or you want to learn how to sing a Bollywood song, then can you change the way you learn how to do that, as again starting from the basics, right? So for us, that is again a very, very big thesis. The third, we'll have to see how it play out, is we've seen that there's a sizable number of digitally connected customer clusters that are being created, right? Whether it's people who are gig workers, senior citizens, teens and youth, right? So what this does is, in the offline, it is much harder to access a large set of these customers, which is possible online. So our whole thesis revolves on how you can build products and services that are specially catered to these, and fundamentally these by themselves, as niche as they are, can be very, very large businesses, right?
Right.
And of course, for us in this, the big theme for this is obviously sustainable, in terms of development impact, right? Even if you have products and services, we believe more and more people are going to talk about sustainability. So how are you going to package it? How are you going to get your vegetables for it? How are you going to create the products? All of these become very, very critical here.
Correct. And when it comes to sectors, looks like fintech, edtech, and retail tech are the three sectors which you're focusing on,
Oh,
or
absolutely. Yeah, these are three sectors. We will have, maybe 20-25% of fund for, some other things, right? Which include, I think gaming is there is, I think, interesting, not in these single games, right?
right?
Not in these, um, but mostly in the infrastructure, there could be some interesting one in social, again, a gaming social company could be very interesting. So we have a
Right.
few of these. We'll have to see kind of how those play out. But fundamentally, yeah, a big bias is on these three sectors.
Got it. And I had a following question on the sectors that you're focusing on. When you look at D2C brands, what I've seen is over the years, a lot of marketers are putting 70 or 80% of their budget into Facebook and Google ads, but which has led to an increase in the CAC, right? But is there any
Yes.
way a lot of these D2C brands can look at lowering their CAC, because what is going to happen with COVID is a lot of people would want to look at not offline stores, but maybe D2C brands, especially with millennials and Gen Zs
Right.
who correlate with D2C brands more. So any suggestions for founders who running D2C brands on how to lower down the CAC?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I'm gonna we'll talk about our fund a little, because one of the things that we saw is a lot of the money that we when we give companies, right, they used on in two things, right? One is marketing, and the second one is on hiring, right?
Right.
Um, and so we went back and said, what is it about marketing that we can optimize, right? Of course, I'm not, again, Facebook, Google, these are going to be extremely, extremely, important channels, right? But some of the other
Absolutely.
channels we're seeing that are playing out very nicely, right, is what. So some of the channels we see are, for example, Paytm, right? Now, Paytm is potentially
Right.
coming out with this mini app strategy. Right now, can we tie up with Paytm to help our companies get access to their customers? Can we tie up with, let's say, a CureFit and help some of our companies that are focused on health and wellness? Can they sit on top of kind of CureFit and get access to the customers where it's a win-win for everybody, right? So some of these quote unquote non-traditional channels that have access to customers that are very that are access to customers, in a certain segment, and can
Right.
you get your companies that have adjacent products to actually sit on these, right? And if you look at open financial, that big thing came from ICICI Bank, right, to begin with. It's not from Google or Facebook, right?
Right.
The first, the big customers came from there. Or if you look at small case, they sat on Zerodha, right? Till they're sitting on Zerodha, nothing happened. But as soon as they sat on Zerodha, they had access to these, thousands of traders, and suddenly the whole product took off, right? Um, so it's not like we're
Interesting.
not seeing this play out, right? So I think a lot of times your B2C brands have to start thinking, innovatively, where think of companies that had access to their customers, right, to their core customers, and I think that will play a large role in decreasing that gap. And we love that model, right? And because
Right.
it's such a win-win for everybody.
Correct. Absolutely. And you basically back the founders at a very early stage. But what is your taste for a founding team's ability to execute on go to market when you meeting them early on? Are there any signals which help you judge that the founding team can execute?
So personal pain point typically comes first, right? I mean, has this guy really faced, that pain point that he's trying to solve, right?
Interesting.
And that goes back with, how much experience he has in the space and all of that, right? We've had, recently talked to a founder, I won't name the company, but he's been spending a lot of times in schools helping children with their emotional quotient, right? Or ability to tackle emotional problems.
Right.
So he's firsthand actually helped a bunch of kids, and now he's trying to kind of take this whole thing and scale it, right? Now, for us, that is very, very interesting. Sounds like a niche, sounds like all of that, but this founder now understands his space significantly well, because 5-7 years before that, he was actually working with children and helping them do it, right? And he's
Interesting.
seen that pain point. He's built content around it, right? So he has something that very, very hard to replicate, right? Even though someone might see the same problem, for them to replicate is very hard, because they have to kind of, build in his 5, 7, 10 years of experience of doing it, which is very, very hard.
Right.
Right. Some of the ways we look at that is saying, is he able to very clearly articulate, what he's trying to build and for whom he's trying to build, right? And typically someone who's actually seen the pain point personally, felt the pain point, and able to very deeply articulate it. And with that, obviously, with that articulation comes with all the levers that affects, the business, whether it's through, what levers affect your unit economics, and that becomes very critical. So I think, a combination of these three help us with very early on to figure out whether this is the right team to back, for this market. Of course, then the second, the next question is this market going to be large enough? How long is it going to take to play out? All of those things, right? But for these three become very, very important factors.
Interesting. So, Raveen, I quickly want to do the top three. What's your favorite business book?
Wow. So I don't read a lot of business books, but of course, I think 0 to 1 is obviously one
Right.
book that I try to read every at least once a year, right? Because every time I kind of new things come out of it for me, right? The other book I liked a lot, which is I think more recent, is Super Forecasting. Again, not so much of business books, but really helps you start thinking about what it means to kind of forecast, right? Again, it's Philip Tetlock and Dan Gardner.
Okay.
Love that book. Again, another book, of course, is one of the guys that you interviewed, James Clear. Atomic Habits.
Atomic Habits.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just love the book. Again, this is one of those books that you have to keep reading and rereading in order to get the most out of it.
No, absolutely. And, if you could go back in time when you started working on startups, be it Myntra, Opus, what is the one thing you would have focused on or done anything differently?
I think one of the things I didn't do in all of these startups, right, and I've mentioned it a few times, in the speaking, Rohit, is the development impact, right? How are you impacting the world with what you're doing, right?
Right.
And I wish I spent a lot more time measuring some of that, because I believe that a lot of your decisions that you make will actually get better with it, right? I know people feel that, why should I look at social impact? Why should I do this, right? But actually, it's not that you don't have to do it with the lens of saying I'm going to do good to society, right? But really with the lens of saying, how are your decisions impacting the world? And I think with that comes a lot of learning about your customers, about how you should react and what you should be doing, right? So that's one thing I've never done. I've started doing it lately with with a lot of my portfolio companies.
Right.
I really wish this was something that I spent a lot of time on throughout, right? Whether it's Myntra, whether it's packaging, where am I sourcing from, or whether it's who goes with kids products, right? How am I shipping it? I think that for me is I think a big miss, but something that I want to change now. Over the next 20 years that I'm going to be investing.
Interesting. And do you have any favorite online tools? Example, Gmail, Slack, Zoom.
Yeah, exactly it, right? Zoom, how can you, and Zoom, is more than a favorite tool, right? It's such a large unlock in Edtech,
Correct.
For us, that is such a big one, right? It's not just, what LinkedIn in some sense was to business connects, right?
Correct.
Zoom is such a big unlock for so many businesses. I'm seeing, I do my yoga now on Zoom. My yoga teacher, was not big on technology, but now he's, gone there, picked up Zoom and he's able to teach, right? The whole thing is, these have become, Zoom has really enabled a lot of these businesses. And I obviously want to encourage a lot of my, Edtech companies to start really figuring out how to use Zoom to really scale, right? So Zoom is obviously a big one. Slack for sure, just because any tool that democratizes, whether it's communication or democratizes things that you do, right? So for like Zerodha again, phenomenal tool for to help with all your online trading, right? It democratizes it. So any tool that does that for me is huge. So I would say top 3: Zoom, Slack, Zerodha, I guess.
Correct. We'll put that in the show notes. And what is the best way people can reach out to you and founders and LPs can know more about Multiply Ventures?
Best would be of course send us an email, raveen@multiplyventures.com. That's probably the easiest way. But of course, I'm on the usual channels: Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. Those would be great channels too. So would love to talk to any founder. In fact, one of the things that we will do in the next couple of days is have some office hours.
Right.
So I will share our Zoom links for people to just set up a time and come in and talk to us if it helps.
Correct. We'll put that in the show notes. Raveen, thank you so much for coming onto the show and speaking to us. I really enjoyed speaking to you.
Thank you so much, Rohit.
Thanks for listening to the Life Self-Mastery podcast, where we teach you how to start and grow your online business. For more information, visit Rohit's blog at www.lifeselfmastery.com.